I stood alone in the middle of that dark highway, rain pouring down on me, watching the taillights of my parents' car disappear into the storm. My mother had just screamed those words that would echo in my mind forever. An ungrateful daughter doesn't deserve to sit in our car. Get out, let God judge you. My father, the man who was supposed to protect me, had grabbed my arm and physically dragged me out into the torrential downpour while my brother Jack sat in the back seat smirking at his phone. They had left me there to die, and the terrifying part was that I could see in their eyes they enjoyed it. But before I tell you what happened next, if you're invested in stories about standing up against toxic family members and finding justice when everyone else has abandoned you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support means everything, and I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been in a situation where your own family turned against you? Share your story below because you're not alone. Now let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. 3 months earlier, I thought I had finally found some peace in my life. I had a steady job as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized firm in Chicago, a small apartment that I could actually afford, and for the first time in my 28 years, I felt like I was building something that was mine. My name is Harper Vance, and I was the oldest child in a family that had spent my entire life making me feel like I owed them something just for existing. My parents, Alara and Richard Vance, had spent decades mastering how to twist guilt into obligation and love into leverage. My mother was the type of woman who could smile at you while twisting a knife in your back, always impeccably dressed, always concerned about what the neighbors thought, always reminding me that family came first. My father was quieter, weaker, the kind of man who would nod along to whatever my mother said and then avoid eye contact when you needed him most. And then there was Jax, my younger brother, by 4 years the golden child who could do no wrong. Growing up, I had learned early that my role in the family was to be the responsible one, the one who sacrificed, the one who fixed everyone else's problems. When Jax crashed his first car at 17, I was the one who had to work extra shifts at the diner to help pay for the repairs because, as my mother put it, your brother is going through a difficult time and we all need to support him. When Jax dropped out of college after 2 semesters of partying, I was the one who had to skip my own graduation trip because my parents needed to redirect funds to give him another chance. The pattern continued for years. Every time Jax got into trouble, which was often, I was expected to step in. He borrowed money from me constantly, small amounts at first, $50 here, $100 there, always with promises to pay me back. He never did. I kept a mental tally that eventually grew to over $15,000, money I had earned through hard work and careful saving, money that disappeared into his endless stream of bad decisions and expensive tastes. I had tried to set boundaries before. I really had. But every time I pushed back, my mother would launch into her carefully crafted speeches about family loyalty, about how I was being selfish, about how Jax was still finding himself and needed our support. My father would just look away, offering neither support nor opposition, his silence, a form of complicity. And Jax would just laugh it off, making jokes about how I was too uptight, too boring, too obsessed with money. But this time was different. This time the amount was staggering. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday evening. I was making dinner in my small kitchen, enjoying the quiet after a long day at work when my phone lit up with my mother's name. I almost didn't answer, but years of conditioning made me press that green button. "Harper, darling, we need to talk about something important." My mother's voice was honeyed, which immediately put me on alert. She only used that tone when she wanted something. "What is it, Mom?" "It's about Jax. He's in a bit of a situation and we need the family to come together." My stomach dropped. "What kind of situation?" "Well, you know how your brother likes to have fun and he's been going through a rough patch. He made some investments that didn't pan out and now he owes some people money." "How much money?" There was a pause and I could hear my mother taking a breath. $50,000. I nearly dropped the wooden spoon I was holding. "50,000, Mom, what are you talking about? What kind of investments?" "That's not important right now, Harper. What's important is that this is a serious situation and these are not the kind of people you want to owe money to. Your father and I have talked to them and we've worked out an arrangement. We just need you to contribute your share." My share, I could feel my voice rising. "Mom, I don't have that kind of money. I just started this job 6 months ago and I'm still paying off my student loans." "We know you have savings, Harper. You've always been so careful with money. Your father and I will cover $30,000 and we need you to cover the remaining $20,000. The amount felt like a physical blow. That was nearly everything I had managed to save over the past 5 years, money I had been setting aside for a down payment on a house, for my future, for the life I was trying to build. "Mom, I can't. That's my entire savings. I need that money." "Harper Vance, are you really going to let your brother suffer because you're too selfish to help your own family?" Her voice had shifted from honeyed to sharp in an instant. These people are dangerous. They've made threats. Do you want something to happen to Jax? What kind of investments lead to owing dangerous people money, Mom? Tell me the truth. We'll discuss the details when we see you. Your father and I are arranging a family dinner this Friday at Marcello's. 7 o'clock. Don't be late. She hung up before I could protest further. I stood there in my kitchen, the pot on the stove beginning to boil over, feeling a familiar sense of dread settle over me. I had been down this road so many times before, but never with stakes this high. I spent the next few days trying to get more information, calling my mother back, texting Jax, but getting only vague responses and increasing pressure to just trust the family. By Friday evening, as I drove through downtown Chicago toward Marcello's, an upscale Italian restaurant my parents loved because it made them feel important, I had made a decision. I would hear them out, but I was not going to hand over my life savings without a full explanation. I was not going to let them manipulate me this time. The moment I walked into the restaurant, I knew it was going to be worse than I thought. The hostess led me to a private room in the back, away from other diners, and as I entered, I saw my entire family already seated around a table that felt more like an interrogation setup than a family dinner. My mother sat at one end, her posture perfect, her expression carefully neutral. My father sat to her right, already looking uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes. And Jack sat at the other end, lounging in his chair like he didn't have a care in the world, his phone in his hand, that familiar smirk on his face. Outside, I could hear thunder rumbling in the distance. A storm was rolling, in the kind of late spring thunderstorm that Chicago was known for, the kind that could turn violent without warning. "Harper, sit down," my mother said, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. I sat feeling the weight of their stares. A waiter appeared, poured wine that I didn't ask for, and quickly disappeared. The air in the room felt thick, oppressive, like the pressure before a storm breaks. Now my mother began folding her hands on the table. "Let's discuss this situation like adults. I'd like to know what kind of investments Jax made that led to owing $50,000, I said, cutting straight to the point. Jax looked up from his phone, his smirk widening. "Does it really matter, sis? Money's money, right? It matters to me if you're asking me to give you $20,000. "We're not asking, Harper," my mother said coldly. "We're telling you this is what needs to happen. Family is everything, and you need to do your part." "My part? I've been doing my part my entire life. I've been bailing Jax out since we were teenagers. I've lent him money he's never paid back. I've covered for him, I've made excuses for him, and I've sacrificed my own goals to help him. But this is different. This is my entire savings. This is my future." "Your future," Jax laughed, actually laughed. "Come on, Harper. You're not exactly living some glamorous life. You've got a boring job, a boring apartment, and a boring existence. At least I'm out there living. Living off other people's money, you mean?" "That's enough," my father finally spoke, his voice weak. "Let's not fight." "No, Dad, let's fight," I said, turning to him. "Because I want to know what's really going on here. What kind of investments was it really?" My mother and father exchanged a look, and in that moment I saw the truth in their eyes. It wasn't investments at all. "It was gambling, wasn't it?" I said quietly. The silence that followed confirmed everything. "Jax has been gambling," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "He's been betting on sports, playing poker, getting in over his head with bookies, and now you want me to pay for it." "It's more complicated than that," my mother said, her voice tight. "No, it's not. It's actually very simple. Jax made stupid choices again, and you want me to fix it again. But I'm not going to do it this time." "You don't understand," my mother leaned forward, her eyes intense. "These people, Harper, they're not playing games, they're connected. They've made it very clear what will happen if Jax doesn't pay. Your father and I have already spoken with them, with Tony Moretti specifically, and we've assured them that the money will be paid in full by the end of the month." Tony Moretti. Even I had heard that name. He was known in Chicago, a man who operated in the shadows, running illegal gambling operations and worse. The fact that my parents were dealing with someone like that terrified me, but it also made me angry. They had put our entire family at risk because they couldn't say no to Jax. "Then you and Dad can pay the full amount," I said. "I'm not giving you my savings." "Harper," my father finally looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that might have been desperation or might have been anger. "We've already told Moretti that you agreed to pay your portion. We've given him your contact information. He's expecting the money." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You did what?" "We had to give him assurances," my mother said. "We told him that the Vance family stands together, that we would all contribute to resolve this debt. He has your name, your phone number, and your address. You gave a loan shark my personal information without my permission. We're your parents," my mother said, as if that justified everything. "We're allowed to make decisions for the good of the family." I stood up so fast my chair scraped loudly against the floor. No, absolutely not. You had no right to do that. I never agreed to any of this. Sit down, Harper, my mother's voice was ice. No, I'm leaving. I turned toward the door, but my mother's next words stopped me. If you walk out that door, you're not part of this family anymore. I turned back slowly. Excuse me. You heard me. If you abandon your brother in his time of need, if you choose money over family, then you're no daughter of mine. Jax was still smirking, scrolling through his phone like this whole conversation was mildly entertaining at best. My father was looking down at his plate, unable or unwilling to meet my eyes. This is insane, I said. You're actually threatening to disown me because I won't give you $20,000 to cover Jax's gambling debts. We're asking you to do the right thing, my mother said. We're asking you to remember what family means. The thunder outside was getting louder now, and through the windows of the private room, I could see the sky had turned an ominous dark gray. Rain was beginning to fall, light at first, then heavier. You want to know what family means, I said, my voice shaking with anger. Family means parents who protect their children, not throw them to the wolves. Family means a brother who respects you, not someone who uses you as an ATM. Family means people who care about your well-being, not just what you can do for them. How dare you? My mother stood, her face flushed. After everything we've done for you, after we raised you, fed you, clothed you, paid for your education. I paid for my own education, I shouted back. I worked 3 jobs in college because you decided Jax's car was more important than my tuition. I've been on my own since I was 18 years old, and the only time you ever call me is when you need something. You ungrateful. I'm not giving you the money. The words hung in the air like a declaration of war. My mother's face went from red to white, her lips pressed into a thin line. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. And Jax, for the first time that evening, looked up from his phone with something that might have been genuine surprise. Then we have nothing more to discuss, my mother said coldly. She picked up her purse and gestured to my father and Jax. We're leaving. Harper can find her own way home. Fine by me, I said, even though I'd driven 40 minutes to get here. But then something in my mother's expression changed, a flash of something cruel and calculated. Actually, no. You're coming with us. We need to discuss this further, and you're going to listen. I'm not going anywhere with you. My father stood and walked toward me, and for a moment I thought he was going to take my side to finally stand up to my mother. But instead he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. You're coming with us, Harper. Get in the car. Dad let go of me. Just get in the car. We'll talk on the way home. The next thing I knew, I was being ushered out of the restaurant, my protests ignored, my mother walking ahead with her head held high, Jax following behind, still glued to his phone. The rain was coming down harder now, and by the time we reached their car in the parking lot, we were all getting soaked. My father opened the back door and practically pushed me inside. I landed next to Jax, who looked at me with that same infuriating smirk. Chill out, Harper, he said. It's just money. Just money, Jax. This is my entire savings. This is everything I've worked for. And family is everything, my mother said from the front seat as my father started the car. You'll understand that eventually. The drive began in tense silence, broken only by the sound of rain pounding on the roof and windshield. The storm had arrived in full force now, with lightning flashing across the sky and thunder shaking the car. The windshield wipers were working at full speed but could barely keep up with the downpour. We were heading north on I-94 away from the city, and I realized with growing unease that we weren't going back to my apartment or to their house. We were going somewhere else. Where are we going? I asked. We're taking the scenic route, my mother said without turning around. We need time to talk, and you need time to think about your decision. I've made my decision. I'm not paying Jax's debts. You know, sis, Jax, said his voice casual, you're being really dramatic about this. I'll pay you back eventually. Like you've paid me back the other $15,000 you owe me. He shrugged. That's different. How is it different? Because this time it matters. I turned to stare at him. Are you seriously telling me that the $15,000 you borrowed from me over the years didn't matter? I mean, it was small stuff. 100 here, a few hundred there. This is the big leagues now. Jax, you're a leech. You've been sucking money from me since you were 16 years old, and you've never once said thank you or paid back a single dollar. Watch your mouth, my mother snapped from the front seat. That's your brother you're talking about. That's my brother who's a spoiled, entitled, irresponsible gambler, I shot back. The car swerved suddenly, and I grabbed the door handle. The rain was so heavy now that visibility was almost zero. Lightning struck somewhere close, the flash so bright it momentarily blinded me, followed immediately by a crack of thunder that felt like the world was splitting open. "Richard, pull over," my mother said. "What, why?" "Just pull over, now." My father slowed the car and pulled onto the shoulder of the highway. We were in the middle of nowhere, no lights visible in any direction, just darkness and rain and wind that rocked the car. "What are we doing?" I asked, a note of fear creeping into my voice. My mother turned in her seat to face me, and the look in her eyes made my blood run cold. It was a look of pure disgust of someone looking at something they considered worthless. "Harper, you've made your choice. You've chosen money over your family. You've shown us who you really are." "What are you talking about? An ungrateful daughter doesn't deserve to sit in our car." Her voice was steady, controlled, deliberate. "Get out." "What, Mom? We're in the middle of a storm. We're miles from anywhere." "Get out, Harper. Let God judge you." "You can't be serious. You're going to leave me here." "You're the one who's leaving the family. We're just making it official." I looked at my father, hoping, praying that he would intervene, that he would finally show some backbone and stand up to her. But he just stared straight ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his jaw clenched. "Dad, please, don't do this." He said nothing. "Jax, tell them this is insane." My brother looked up from his phone, shrugged, and went back to scrolling. "Your choice, sis." My mother reached across and opened my door. The sound of the storm rushed in, deafening, terrifying. Rain and wind invaded the car, soaking the seats, whipping my hair across my face. "Get out." "Mom, please. Get out." My father's hand was suddenly on my arm again, and before I could fully process what was happening, he was pulling me toward the open door. I tried to resist, tried to hold on to the door frame, but he was stronger than I expected, and my mother was pushing from the other side. "Stop, please stop." But they didn't stop. My father dragged me out of the car, and I fell onto the muddy shoulder of the highway, landing hard on my hands and knees. The rain hit me like a physical force, instantly soaking through my clothes. I looked up through the downpour and saw my mother and father's faces staring down at me from inside the car, my mother's expression cold and satisfied, my father's eyes finally meeting mine for just a moment before looking away in shame. In the back seat, Jax was grinning, holding up his phone, and I realized with horror that he was recording this. The door slammed shut with a finality that echoed in my chest. The engine revved and the car pulled back onto the highway, its taillights glowing red through the rain, getting smaller and smaller until they disappeared completely into the storm. I was alone. I knelt there on the side of I-94, and I felt something inside me break. Not my spirit, not my will, but something else. The last thread of hope that my family loved me, that they cared about me, that I mattered to them at all. It snapped, and in its place a cold clarity began to form. They didn't just not love me, they enjoyed hurting me. They had driven me out here to the middle of nowhere in the worst storm of the season, and they had thrown me out of their car like I was trash. And Jax had been recording it, probably already planning to share it online to humiliate me further. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking, and looked around. There was nothing but darkness and rain and the occasional flash of lightning that revealed only empty highway stretching in both directions. I was miles from anywhere, soaking wet, with no way to call for help because my phone was in my purse in their car. I had never felt so completely alone in my entire life. But I had also never felt so clear about what I needed to do. I started walking along the shoulder, heading in the direction of what I hoped was the nearest exit. The rain was relentless, the wind pushing against me, but I kept moving. I didn't know how long I walked, maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour, but eventually I saw lights in the distance, a truck stop like a beacon of hope in the darkness. I stumbled toward it, my clothes plastered to my body, my hair hanging in wet tangles, mud caked on my hands and knees from where I'd fallen. I must have looked like something from a horror movie because when I pushed through the doors of the convenience store, the clerk behind the counter actually gasped. "Jesus, are you okay? What happened to you?" "I need to use your phone," I managed to say through chattering teeth. "Please." He handed me the store phone without hesitation, and I stood there under the harsh fluorescent lights, dripping water onto the linoleum floor, trying to remember the one phone number I knew by heart besides my family's. Ava Chen, my best friend from college, the one person who had always seen through my family's bullshit, the one person who had told me years ago that I needed to cut them off. I dialed her number with shaking fingers. "Hello," her voice was cautious, not recognizing the number. "Ava, it's me. It's Harper." "Harper. Oh my God, where are you? Why are you calling from this number?" "Can you come get me? I'm at a truck stop on I-94 about 40 miles north of the city. I'll explain everything, but please, can you just come? I'm already grabbing my keys. Text me the address from this number. I'll be there in less than an hour." I hung up and gave the phone back to the clerk, who was still staring at me with concern. "There's a bathroom in the back if you want to clean up," he said gently. and I can get you some coffee. Thank you. I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at my reflection under the flickering fluorescent light. Mascara streaked down my face, my hair hung in tangled clumps, mud caked my clothes. But it was my eyes that stopped me. They looked empty, hollowed out like something vital had been scraped away. I turned on the faucet and washed the mud from my hands, watching the brown water swirl down the drain. I cleaned my face, tried to comb my fingers through my hair, but there was no fixing the wreckage. And as I stood there staring at my reflection, something shifted inside me. The tears I expected didn't come. The despair that should have overwhelmed me stayed at bay. Instead, I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. A realization, a truth I could no longer avoid. They didn't just fail to love me, they actively enjoyed my pain. My mother's satisfied expression as she ordered me out of the car. My father's refusal to look at me as he dragged me out. Jax's grin as he filmed my humiliation. They weren't just indifferent to my suffering, they were entertained by it. And that changed everything. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to break. I was going to survive this night, and then I was going to make sure they faced consequences they couldn't buy or lie their way out of. By the time Ava arrived, pulling into the truck stop parking lot in her Honda Civic, I had made my decision. I climbed into her car and she immediately turned up the heat, looking at me with a mixture of concern and barely contained fury. "What the hell happened to you?" she asked. "They left me on the highway," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "They drove me out to the middle of nowhere in this storm and they threw me out of the car." Ava's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "They what?" "My parents and Jax. They wanted me to pay $20,000 to cover his gambling debts." I said no, and this was their response. "Harper, she struggled for words. "That's criminal. That's assault. That could have killed you." "I know. We need to call the police." "Not yet," I said, and something in my tone made her look at me sharply. "I need to think this through. I need to plan." "Plan what?" "How to make sure they can't do this to anyone else. How to make sure they face real consequences." Ava was quiet for a moment, then she nodded slowly. "Come to my place. Get warm, get dry, and then we'll figure this out together." She drove me to her apartment, a small one-bedroom in Wicker Park that felt like a sanctuary after the hell I'd just been through. She gave me dry clothes, made me hot tea, and sat with me on her couch while I told her the whole story from beginning to end. The years of manipulation, the constant demands for money, the way they'd always prioritized Jax over me, and finally tonight's ultimate betrayal. "I've been telling you for years that your family is toxic," Ava said gently when I finished. "But I never thought they'd go this far." "Neither did I admitted. "But now I see them clearly. And I'm done pretending they're good people who just make mistakes. They're not. They're manipulative, abusive, and dangerous. So what do you want to do?" I took a sip of tea, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. "You work for that law firm, right? The one that handles criminal cases?" "Yes. Why? Do you know anyone who deals with illegal gambling operations?" Ava's eyes widened with understanding. "You want to report Jax?" "I want to report all of them. Jax for the gambling debts, my parents for giving my information to a loan shark without my consent, and I want to make sure Tony Moretti knows that I had nothing to do with any agreement my parents made. Harper, if you go after Moretti's operation, this is going to get serious fast." "It's already serious. They left me to die on a highway. How much more serious can it get?" Ava thought for a moment, then pulled out her phone. "I know someone. Detective Miller. He's been investigating illegal gambling rings in Chicago for years. If you have information about Jax's connections to these operations, he'll want to hear it." "I have more than information," I said. "I have evidence." "What kind of evidence?" "Jax has been bragging about his gambling wins for years. He sends me text messages, posts on social media, sends me screenshots of big payouts. I've saved everything. I have names of bookies, details about operations, amounts of money, dates, everything. I never thought I'd need it for this, but I've been documenting his behavior for years just to keep track of how much he's borrowed from me." Ava stared at me with something like admiration. "You've been building a case against him without even knowing it." "I guess so." "Let me make a call, but Harper, once you start this, there's no going back. Are you absolutely sure?" I thought about my mother's face as she told me to get out, my father's cowardice, Jax's smirk as he filmed my humiliation, the feeling of rain and mud and absolute abandonment. "I'm sure." Over the next few days, I stayed with Ava while we built my case. I went through years of text messages, emails, and screenshots, organizing everything into a chronological timeline of Jax's gambling activities. I documented every loan I'd given him, every time my parents had pressured me to help him, every red flag I'd ignored because I thought that's what family did. The evidence was damning. Jax had been involved in illegal sports betting for at least 5 years, gradually getting in deeper and deeper with more dangerous people. His text messages included names of bookies, amounts he'd won and lost, and even references to Tony Moretti's operation. He'd been stupid enough to document his own criminal activity, never thinking anyone would use it against him. On Wednesday, Ava arranged a meeting with Detective Miller at a quiet coffee shop downtown. He was a man in his late 40s with graying hair and tired eyes that had seen too much of humanity's worst. But when I started showing him the evidence, those tired eyes became sharp and focused. "Miss Vance," he said after reviewing about half of what I'd brought, "do you understand what you're giving me here?" "Yes. Evidence of illegal gambling operations in Chicago. It's more than that. Your brother's communications include details about Moretti's organization that we've been trying to get for 2 years. You're handing us a way to potentially bring down one of the biggest illegal gambling rings in the state." "Good." He leaned back in his chair studying me. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Are you doing this for revenge or for justice?" I thought about his question carefully. 6 days ago, I would have said revenge. But now I want justice. Not just for me, but for everyone else, Moretti and people like my brother hurt. I want them to face consequences they can't buy their way out of. I want them to understand that actions have repercussions. And you understand that this won't be easy, that your family will likely turn even more hostile, that testifying against your own brother could put you in danger. They already put me in danger when they left me on a highway in a thunderstorm. They already chose their side. Now I'm choosing mine." Miller nodded slowly. "All right. I'll need you to come to the station and give a formal statement. Everything you've shown me today will need it officially documented. And Miss Vance, I'll be honest with you. With evidence like this, there's a very good chance your brother will face serious charges. We're talking potential felony gambling charges, possibly fraud, depending on what else we find. And if your parents knowingly helped him conceal illegal activity or gave your personal information to a criminal organization, they could face charges too." "I understand. Are you prepared for that?" I looked down at my hands, remembering how they'd looked, covered in mud and rain that night, remembering the feeling of being discarded like trash. "Yes, I'm prepared." Over the next week, I gave my formal statement to the police. I handed over years of documentation. I went through my phone, my email, my social media, everything providing a complete picture of Jax's illegal activities. Detective Miller's team was thorough and professional, and with each piece of evidence I provided, I could see the case against my brother growing stronger. But while I was building the legal case, my family was building their own narrative on social media. It started with a Facebook post from my mother. "Sometimes the people you sacrifice everything for turn out to be the ones who hurt you the most. We raised our daughter with love and values, but some people choose greed over family, praying for guidance." The post was vague enough to seem heartfelt, but specific enough that anyone who knew our family would know she was talking about me. Within hours, it had dozens of comments from family, friends, and distant relatives, all expressing sympathy for my poor mother and her ungrateful daughter. Then came Jax's contribution. He posted a series of messages on Instagram and Twitter, painting me as a cold-hearted sister who had refused to help him in his time of need. Blood means nothing to some people. When your own sister values money more than your life, you learn who your real family is. My father, true to form, stayed silent on social media, but I heard from mutual acquaintances that he was telling people privately that I had lost my way and broken his heart. The smear campaign was working. People who had known me my entire life were sending me messages asking what had happened, some supportive but many accusatory. The story my parents were telling was that I was a greedy, heartless daughter who had abandoned my family when they needed me most. What they didn't know was that I didn't care anymore. Let them tell their lies. Let them play the victims. The truth would come out soon enough. The phone call came on a Sunday evening. My mother's number, which I had been ignoring for days. But this time something made me answer. "What do you want?" "Harper." Her voice was tight with fury. "What have you done?" "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play games with me. The police have been asking questions about Jax. They want to talk to him about his gambling activities. This is your doing." "Is it?" "You vindictive little," she caught herself, took a breath. "Do you have any idea what you've done to this family? Do you understand the consequences of your actions?" Funny, that's exactly what I've been thinking about, the consequences of everyone's actions. If you don't stop this right now, if you don't tell the police you made a mistake, that you were upset and exaggerating, I will make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. I will destroy your reputation, your career, everything." "Go ahead," I said calmly. "Tell people whatever you want. Post whatever you want on social media. But Mom, the police don't care about your Facebook posts. They care about evidence. And I have plenty of that." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "You've chosen your path," she finally said. "But remember, you made this choice. Everything that happens now is on you." "No, Mom. Everything that happens now is on you and Dad and Jax. You chose to prioritize a gambling addict over your daughter. You chose to give my information to criminals. You chose to throw me out of a car in a thunderstorm. These are your choices. I'm just making sure you face the consequences." I hung up before she could respond. 2 days later, Detective Miller called me. "Miss Vance, I wanted to give you a heads up. We're moving forward with charges against your brother. We have enough evidence for multiple felony counts related to illegal gambling operations. We're also investigating your parents' involvement, particularly the matter of them giving your personal information to a known criminal organization without your consent. When will this become public? The arrest warrant will be executed tomorrow morning. After that, it'll be a matter of public record. Thank you for letting me know. Miss Vance, I want you to know that what you did took courage. A lot of people in your situation would have just walked away and tried to forget about it. But by coming forward, you've helped us potentially take down an organization that's been hurting people for years." "I didn't do it to be a hero," I said. "I did it because they needed to face consequences. Sometimes that's the same thing." The next morning, I woke up to dozens of text messages and missed calls. The news had broken. Jax had been arrested on multiple charges related to illegal gambling. The story was in the local news, and while my name wasn't mentioned, anyone who knew our family would be able to connect the dots. The social media storm that followed was immediate and vicious. My mother posted a long, rambling message about betrayal and family loyalty, never mentioning the illegal gambling or the fact that they'd left me on a highway. Jax's friends rallied around him, posting about how he was being persecuted for having fun and how his family had turned against him. My father remained silent as always. But something interesting also happened. People started reaching out to me privately, people who had also been hurt by my family's behavior over the years. Relatives who had been manipulated, friends who had been used, business associates who had been scammed. My family's carefully constructed facade of respectability was cracking, and the ugliness underneath was starting to show. One message in particular stood out. It was from Tony Moretti's lawyer. "Miss Vance, my client wishes to make it clear that he had no knowledge of the circumstances surrounding your family's debt arrangement. He was told you were a willing participant in covering your brother's obligations. He does not conduct business with unwilling participants. Your parents misrepresented the situation to him. The debt is now solely your brother's and your parents' responsibility. You are not involved. My client suggests you maintain appropriate distance from your family's financial matters going forward." It was the closest thing to an apology I would ever get from a loan shark, and it confirmed what I had suspected. My parents had lied to. Moretti told him I'd agreed to pay, put my name on the line without my knowledge or consent. They'd been willing to put me in danger with a dangerous criminal just to protect Jax. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. I was listed as a witness, which meant I would have to face my family in court. Ava offered to come with me, and I gratefully accepted. The day of the hearing, I dressed in my most professional outfit, a navy blue suit that made me feel armored against whatever was coming. Ava drove me to the courthouse, and we walked in together, her presence a steady source of support. In the hallway outside the courtroom, I saw them. My mother, my father, and Jax huddled together with their lawyer. My mother saw me first, and the look she gave me was pure hatred. My father looked away immediately, and Jax surprisingly looked scared for the first time in his life. Their lawyer approached me. "Miss Vance, my clients would like to speak with you before the hearing." "I have nothing to say to them. They want to work out an arrangement. If you are willing to reconsider your testimony." "No. Miss Vance, please understand that this prosecution will likely result in serious consequences for your brother. He could face significant prison time. Your parents could face charges as well. If family means anything to you." "Family," I interrupted, "means people who care about your well-being, who support you, who don't leave you on the side of a highway in a thunderstorm. My biological relatives don't qualify." The lawyer looked like he wanted to say more, but Detective Miller appeared at my side. "Miss Vance is represented by counsel and won't be having any ex parte communications with the defendants," he said firmly. It wasn't technically true. I didn't have a lawyer, but the lawyer backed off. The hearing itself was procedural, mostly establishing the charges and setting timelines for the trial. I didn't have to testify yet, but I sat in the gallery and watched as the prosecutor laid out the evidence against Jax. It was comprehensive and damning, a clear pattern of illegal gambling activity, money laundering, and fraud. When the hearing ended, Jax was released on bail, but the conditions were strict. He wasn't allowed to leave, the state had to surrender his passport, and couldn't contact any of the witnesses, which included me. As I walked out of the courthouse with Ava, I felt a strange sense of lightness. Not happiness exactly, but relief. I had done what needed to be done. I had chosen justice over the twisted version of family loyalty my parents had tried to enforce. But the battle wasn't over. The trial was months away, and in the meantime, I had to rebuild my life. I found a therapist who specialized in family trauma and narcissistic abuse. In our sessions, I began to unpack years of manipulation and gaslighting, to understand that what I had experienced wasn't normal, wasn't my fault, and wasn't something I deserved. Dr. Harrison helped me see that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, that protecting myself wasn't cruel, and that I had the right to demand better treatment from the people in my life. I also started making new connections, building a chosen family of people who actually cared about me. Ava, of course, was at the center of that family, but I also reconnected with old friends from college. I'd lost touch with, joined a support group for people who'd gone no contact with toxic families, and slowly, carefully began to trust people again. At work, I threw myself into my projects with a new intensity. Without the constant drain of my family's demands, I had energy and focus I hadn't had in years. My boss noticed, and I got promoted to senior marketing coordinator with a significant raise. For the first time in my life, the money I earned was truly mine, not earmarked for someone else's problems. 3 months after that night on the highway, I moved into a new apartment, a bright one-bedroom with big windows and a view of the city. It was more expensive than my old place, but I could afford it now, and it felt like a fresh start. Ava helped me move, and we celebrated with pizza and wine, christening my new space with laughter and hope. The trial finally came 6 months after Jax's arrest. I took a week off work and prepared myself mentally for what was coming. I knew I would have to face my family, would have to testify about everything that had happened, would have to relive the worst night of my life in front of a courtroom full of strangers. But I also knew I was ready. The day I took the stand, I wore a gray suit and kept my voice steady as the prosecutor asked me to describe my relationship with my family, the years of financial abuse, and finally that night on the highway. I told the truth, all of it holding nothing back. I presented the evidence I'd collected, the text messages, the emails, the screenshots. I explained how Jax had been gambling illegally for years, how my parents had enabled him, and how they'd ultimately tried to force me to pay his debts by giving my information to a criminal organization. During cross-examination, the defense attorney tried to paint me as vindictive, as someone who was making up stories to hurt my family. He asked if I was angry at them, if I wanted revenge, if I was exaggerating what happened that night. Yes, I was angry, I said calmly, but that doesn't change the facts. My brother committed multiple felonies. My parents endangered me by giving my information to a loan shark, and they left me on the side of a highway in a dangerous storm. These things happened. My anger doesn't make them less true. But isn't it true that you refused to help your brother when he needed you? I refused to give him $20,000 to cover his illegal gambling debts, yes. That's not the same as refusing to help him. If he had wanted real help, he would have sought treatment for his gambling addiction, not demanded money to pay off criminals. So you admit you could have helped, but chose not to. I chose not to enable illegal activity and abusive behavior. Yes. The defense attorney tried a few more angles, but I didn't waver. I had spent months preparing for this, working with my therapist to process my trauma while staying clear-headed about the facts. I knew what I'd experienced. I knew what I'd witnessed. And I wasn't going to let anyone gaslight me into doubting myself again. When I stepped down from the stand, I felt exhausted, but also strangely at peace. I had told my truth. Whatever happened next was out of my hands. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Other witnesses testified, including Detective Miller, the bookies, who had agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences, and even Tony Moretti's associate, who confirmed that my parents had misrepresented my involvement in the debt arrangement. My parents weren't on trial. The prosecution had decided to focus on Jax first, with potential charges against them to follow, but they attended every day, sitting behind their son, presenting a united front. They never looked at me. I never looked at them. When the verdict came, it was swift and decisive, guilty on all major counts. Jax was facing up to 8 years in prison, though, with a plea deal and good behavior he'd likely serve 3 to 4. As the bailiff led him away in handcuffs, Jax finally looked at me. There was no smirk now, no arrogance, just shock and fear, and something that might have been the first real awareness he'd ever had that actions have consequences. My mother sobbed loudly in the gallery, and my father put his arm around her, both of them playing the role of devastated parents. The performance was convincing, but I knew the truth. They weren't devastated that their son had hurt people or broken the law. They were devastated that he'd been caught. Outside the courthouse, reporters tried to get a statement from me, but I waved them off. This wasn't about publicity or revenge. It was about justice, and justice had been served. In the weeks that followed, my parents made one last attempt to manipulate me. They sent flying monkeys, distant relatives, and old family friends to guilt me about destroying the family and sending my brother to prison. Some of the messages were pleading, others were accusatory, but they all had the same theme. I was the villain in this story, and I needed to make it right. I blocked every single one of them. My mother tried calling from different numbers, leaving voicemails that ranged from weeping apologies to screaming threats. I saved them all as evidence just in case, but I never responded. My father sent a letter, handwritten, that arrived at my apartment 3 weeks after the trial. In it, he tried to explain that he'd been weak, that my mother had controlled everything, that he'd wanted to protect me, but didn't know how. He ended by asking if I could ever forgive him. I read the letter once, then filed it away. Maybe someday I would respond, but not now. He'd had every opportunity to stand up for me, to be the father I needed, and he'd failed every single time. A letter didn't undo a lifetime of cowardice. The charges against my parents came 2 months after Jax's conviction. They were accused of fraud, endangerment, and conspiracy to coerce payment of an illegal debt. The trial was shorter than Jax's, and the evidence was strong. In the end, my mother received 18 months in a minimum security facility, and my father received probation and community service with the judge, citing his cooperation and lack of prior criminal history as mitigating factors. When my mother was sentenced, she stood and pointed at me in the gallery. "You did this," she screamed. "You destroyed this family. I hope you're happy." The judge ordered her removed from the courtroom, and as the bailiffs escorted her out, she continued yelling, her voice echoing down the hallways. My father just sat silently, tears running down his face, looking every bit the broken man he'd always been. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sadness, no anger, just a quiet sense of closure. It's been a year since that night on the highway, and my life looks completely different now. I got another promotion at work, and I'm now the marketing director for my company. I have an emergency fund that's growing steadily. I've decorated my apartment exactly how I want it, with bright colors and plants and art that makes me happy. I've been dating someone I met through a friend, a kind, stable person who actually respects my boundaries and supports my healing journey. I'm also writing. Not just journaling, but actually writing my story, the full story of what it's like to grow up in a toxic family and have the courage to walk away. My therapist encouraged it as part of my healing process, but I'm finding that it might be something more. There are so many people out there who are going through what I went through, who feel trapped and guilty and responsible for other people's problems. If my story can help even one person see that they deserve better, that they have the right to protect themselves, then it will have been worth it. Ava is still my best friend, my sister in every way that matters. She was right there with me through every step of this journey, and I don't know if I would have made it without her support. We have dinner together every week, and she reminds me regularly that family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up for you when you need them most. I still have hard days. I still sometimes doubt myself, still hear my mother's voice in my head telling me I'm selfish, still feel that old guilt trying to creep back in. But I have tools now, support systems, and most importantly, I have the knowledge that I did the right thing. Not the easy thing, not the thing that made everyone else comfortable, but the right thing. My biological family will be released from prison eventually. Jax has about 2 more years to serve, and my mother will be out in 6 months. I don't know what will happen when they're free. Part of me expects them to try to contact me again to attempt reconciliation or perhaps retaliation, but I've built strong boundaries now, and I know how to maintain them. I've changed my phone number, moved to a different part of the city, and I have a good support system in place. If they do try to reach out, I'll decide then how to handle it, but I'm not afraid anymore. They have no power over me now. Looking back, that night on the highway was the worst experience of my life, but it was also the night I finally saw my family for what they really were. It was the night I stopped making excuses for them, stopped hoping they would change, and started prioritizing my own well-being and safety. Some people might say I should have just walked away quietly, that I shouldn't have gone to the police, that I should have let them face their own consequences without my involvement. But here's what I learned: walking away would have left other people vulnerable. Jax would have continued gambling illegally, running up debts, and potentially hurting other people. My parents would have continued their pattern of manipulation and abuse with whoever was next in line. And Tony Moretti's operation would have continued preying on vulnerable people with gambling addictions. By standing up and telling the truth, I didn't just save myself, I potentially saved others too, and that's something I can live with. So here I am 1 year later, standing in my bright apartment with my chosen family around me, building a life that's truly mine. I'm not defined by what was done to me or by the family I was born into. I'm defined by the choices I make, the boundaries I set, and the person I'm becoming. And I'm becoming someone I'm proud of. If there's one thing I want people to take away from my story, it's this: you are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Family isn't a free pass to abuse, manipulate, or endanger you. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for others is to speak the truth, set firm boundaries, and walk away from people who refuse to treat you with basic human dignity. It won't be easy. You'll face guilt and pressure and people who tell you that you're being cruel or that you'll regret it. But on the other side of that fear and guilt is freedom. On the other side is a life where you matter, where your needs are valid, where you're treated with respect. You deserve that life, and you have the strength to claim it. So let me ask you, have you ever been in a situation where family expected you to sacrifice everything for them? Where you were told that blood is thicker than water, but that blood felt more like poison? How did you handle it? I want to hear in your story in the comments below, because you're not alone in this struggle. And if this story resonated with you, if it gave you hope or courage or just the feeling that someone understands, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support helps me keep sharing these stories, and together we can build a community where people know they deserve better. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, you are worthy of love, respect, and a life free from abuse. Always.